Okay, Ray, it's 9:05. Should we go ahead and start?
Okay, we can begin. Let's see here. We got a good group of people here with us. Well, good morning, everyone. Good to have you all joining us today for our third session in the series of learning opportunities we have. We can go ahead and start sharing the slideshow. So over the next we've been able to provide these sessions through the support and guidance of the Mental Health Technology and Training Center out of the University of Iowa. And our colleague and friend from Iowa, Megan Dotson, has been kind enough to help us with the technical logistics of getting going. And of course, Shar Pula and her crew at the Albuquerque Area Indian Health Center Epidemiology have been really good at helping us move ahead with this. So this session, we're going to look at signs and symptoms of anxiety. Okay, we have a talking session around anxiety, and I understand we have a mixed group of attendees. We have providers and community members that join us. So we're going to work on talking through what that means with our people. The American Indian Alaska Native Mental Health Technology Transfer Center is a population-specific, what they call addiction technology center, located in Iowa. And you see on this map all the other ATTCs and that are in this national system of technology transfer centers. They're pretty regional, like in our region, New Mexico, we're with the Southwest MTTC, which is located in the headquarters in Dallas. So we're part of that system as a state, but we're also part of the Native American TTC, as well as all the other tribes in the United States. So that's where we're coming from with this. Next slide, please. SAMHSA funds through a grant. SAMHSA is abbreviation for Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. SAMHSA supports the National American Indian Alaska Native Mental Health Technology Transfer Center with a grant, and that's how we're able to provide this opportunity to give some training to our folks here in New Mexico. And there's a thing called a disclaimer, which means that what we share here in the presentation are what we share, is what we created, primarily Shar and I, and we have opinions that we're going to express there. And the opinions that we have don't reflect the policies and views that come out of SAMHSA or Health and Human Services or the American Indian Alaska Native MHTTC. That's a legal thing we have to say. Yeah. And this is especially true because our tribes are quite a bit different from a lot of other tribes in the country, and certainly different from the American ways. Next slide, please. You'll get an email later on asking that will include a link to the presentation slides and a recording of this session. This whole session is recorded so that you can access the information later on. And if you would like to get some CEUs from joining us today, then you can there will be information to the email, follow-up email to you on how to do that. And also very important is a link to the evaluation survey. Those of you that have been working with federal funds for a while might realize that KIPRA is a backbone of evaluation within the federal system. So it helps us report our work back to the federal government so they know that the money they're giving the MHTTC in Iowa is being used well, and that the work we're doing is for a good purpose. So these are important links we'll be getting. And as we do in many parts of our country, we have a land acknowledgement. I'll go ahead and read this. We would like to take this time to acknowledge the land and pay respects to the indigenous nations whose homelands were forcibly taken over and inhabited. Past and present, we want to honor the land itself and the people who have stewarded throughout generations. This calls us to commit to forever learn how to be better stewards of these lands through action, advocacy, support, and education. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced occupation of Native American territories. And we respect the many diverse indigenous people connected to this land on which we gather from time immemorial. While injustices are still being committed against indigenous people on Turtle Island, today we say thank you to those who stand with indigenous peoples and acknowledge that land reparations must be made to allow healing for our indigenous people and to Mother Earth herself. This land acknowledgement was created by 3 people. Ellen Driscoll, she's a Meskwaki, Winnebago person who worked with MHTTC. Keely Driscoll is also another former staff person with MHTTC who helped write this. And Sean Bear, who's also Meskwaki from Iowa. The 3 of them wrote this land acknowledgement, and that's what we use in all our gatherings with our relatives. Next slide.
Let me see. For some reason, it's not going down. Uh-oh. Let's see. There we go.
Okay. This is my bio. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation. I'm not sure if we have, well, I'll do it anyway, but in the Navajo way, like a lot of our ways, we have clans, and I have to introduce my clans. I am, my mother's clan is Kia'ani, or Towering House people. My father's clan are Tlezasana, or Many Goats people. My maternal grandfathers are Tsitna Chini, or Blackstreak people. And my paternal grandfathers are Twitachini, Bitterwater people. Those are my clans that I am descended from. And I'm originally from Hawk, Arizona, a community called Ma'itohe and Navajo, which is in the southern part of the Navajo Nation. So that's my formal introduction to their relatives that are here. You can read this later on when you get to the thing, but I live in on the Navajo Nation and the western part of New Mexico. Next slide, please.
It doesn't.
As we're going through the intro slides, feel free to put questions, comments, and chat so that we can share those discussions with each other. Oh, kind of move backwards there. There's a little brief description of the Albuquerque area Southwest Tribal Epidemiology Center that Shar works with, and most of you who are 988 participants, grantee participants, can relate to this map and where you're from and where we come from. Go ahead.
Okay.
Mhm. There's our fearless leader, Sharon. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. Let me start the video. I'm
Mhm.
multitasking today. Good morning, everyone. Charlene Pula. I am Hopi Tewa and Navajo. Home for me is First Mesa, Palaca, Arizona. But I've lived in New Mexico since elementary, 3rd, 4th grade. I call this home away from home, New Mexico. I am currently at the Albuquerque area Southwest Tribal Epidemiology Center, as you all know, is Aztec. Our parent organization is Albuquerque Area Indian Health Board. So we are a program. Aztec is a program under AAIHB. And we brought this series of trainings based on feedback from some of our sub-awardees on 2 grants, one being the 988 grant and a CDC grant. Folks really wanted to learn more about signs and symptoms of depression, anxiety, substance use. What can we do when it comes to violence prevention and adverse childhood events? So this is a series of 6 trainings. We're on our 3rd training. We are bringing these trainings to you the 4th Tuesday of every month from 9 to 10:30. Ray Daw is our host. He is the facilitator for the training, as well as Megan Dotson, who is at another training for MI, motivational interviewing. She's the coordinator. And Devana and I, as well as Eudora Claw, provide additional support as needed to assist Ray trainings. And Daniel Foster is another contributor to the series. So just wanted you to know who was behind the scenes, the purpose, why it's coming to you. And I hope you guys enjoy the trainings and please provide feedback. We are going to have 2 case studies at the end to address some of the things that you've learned in the training. So then you can apply it to the case study. So that's us in a nutshell.
Yeah. Very well done.
There we go.
There is Dr. Daniel Foster. He's a psychologist working out of Montana these days. And Dan is a really dear colleague and friend and mentor to many of us in Native country. He and his wife are both psychologists, and they help guide the things that we share with you, and the knowledge that he's gained over the years as a psychologist and Lakota relative from. He's originally from Rosebud, South Dakota, and he is a veteran of the U.S. Army, served in Nam. He's also a former U.S. Olympian. He's one of the very few Native Olympians in the country, and he's one of our special athletes that way. So I want to mention that about Dan. And when you keep joining us and attending with us, you'll eventually get to meet him and hear his voice and the gentle ways that he has. He's a traditional Lakota man, as well as being very well educated in the Euro-American ways. So I want to acknowledge my brother Dan in this. So thank you. Next slide. Whoop, me again. Boo, like you say sometimes, boo. And the Aztec grantees, there's 9 communities that you are involved with to work on 988 as a way to begin working with, integrating into your various service delivery systems within the communities that you're with, which are Jicarilla, Mescalero, Tuajachile, Rema, Ute Mountains, Southern Ute, Kewa, and Zuni, and Isleta. A little bit of disclosure, I'm a 988 public information, one of the 988 public information coordinators in the state of New Mexico. So I've been able to visit all the New Mexico communities that are listed here and meet with your leadership and providers. So that's how I ended up having an interest in what you're doing, getting the word out for our people. Next slide. So we have 4 objectives within this session. The first objective is to, to have a discussion and presentation and dialogue around the signs and symptoms of anxiety, particularly the way it's designed and described in the DSM-5 TR. The second objective is to look at what traditional approaches exist to deal with anxiety among our people. The third objective is to have a discussion on what Western ways exist to help someone coping with anxieties. And the fourth objective is to talk about what resources are available to us, our families, our relatives, allies, and colleagues to assist our people experiencing anxiety. So we have these four objectives identified. I want to really extend my appreciation to Shar for helping design these objectives. She's been really good at guiding us through how to present these topics. So these are the objectives. Next slide, please. What is anxiety? Well, anxiety is about 3 different things, really. There's what is called generalized anxiety disorder, or abbreviated as GAD, not God, but GAD, okay? GAD is characterized by persistent, excessive worry about a number of different things, and sometimes it is difficult to control and occurs, occurs for most days for at least 6 months. That's how general anxiety disorder is described, and has 3 or more symptoms that make up what anxiety is. Anxiety is extreme apprehension, which is worry. Another way of saying worry. That is accompanied by unpleasant symptoms. We have these reactions. Our body has these reactions sometimes. Things like feeling nervous or feeling irritable, touchy is another way to say that. And on edge, being on edge. There's a sense of danger. You kind of start looking around, anticipating bad things to happen. Heart rate increases, and breathing sometimes gets a little quicker than usual. You're sweating, trembling. That can occur from extreme apprehension. Feeling tired and weak, or other things that can happen, and then having difficulty concentrating or staying on top of things that we need to do. And there's disruption in how we sleep. Sleep can be shortened or longer, or just not consistent. And anxiety can affect our digestive systems also. This is what extreme anxiety is described as. Then there's panic. Panic is when we have a sudden, almost unexpected, intense fear that triggers real severe physical reactions. The kind of reactions that happen with panic is very quick heartbeat, a lot of nervousness, and feeling sensitive, really sensitive, and not being able to concentrate, and sweating. People talk about flight and fright. The panic can be very much like that, and that's how anxiety is described. And within the DSM, there's a lot of attention paid to general anxiety disorder. And honestly, it's not uncommon for all of us to experience anxiety and even panic. You're driving down the road and somebody swerves in front of you, you're going to have panic around that. You're going to have a reaction to that. And we have things going on in the world these days, in the United States and in Mexico and our tribal communities, that cause us concern. More recently, we have a good amount of anxiety around the pandemic, for example. And I don't know that there isn't anyone who hasn't had anxiety around getting COVID. Speaking to a relative yesterday, a gentleman who's a very good behavioral health provider and very knowledgeable and skilled, he was telling me about his COVID infection from 2 weeks ago, and the anxiety he feels about some of the lingering symptoms that he has from COVID, and how he's had to be very careful about visiting his mother and his dad, who are elderly, of course, and his concerns around not being able to care for them the way he usually can do. And that's anxiety. So we all experience anxiety. That is not unusual for anybody. And it's something I want to make really clear. It's not something that those people get or happens to other people. We experience anxiety frequently, almost every day, in different forms. Next slide, please. The DSM-5 TR says this is how you identify if someone has general anxiety disorder. And there are three things that psychologists and psychiatrists and people who work with anxiety look for. One is the presence of excessive, which is a lot of anxiety and worry about can be over any number of topics or events and activities, and that worry occurs more often than not. Worrying a lot of the time versus worrying sometimes is a sign that and this happening over 6 months is a sign that behavioral health people look for. Someone says, I worry most of the time or all the time, then that's one of the ways. And then clinicians will ask, how long has it been going on? And if a person says, I've been having these real serious worries for over 6 months and all the time, then that's one of the criteria for possibly having a diagnosis of general anxiety disorder. And that worry that folks can have, it affects adults and children. And it's not uncommon for that worrying anxiety to go from one thing to another, especially these days with the pandemic and the kind of violence that's occurring in many parts of the country, and the changes that we're experiencing in weather and climate and cost of living. These are some examples of topics that can kind of go on and just shifting from worrying, shifting from one thing to another. The third criteria for diagnosing general anxiety disorder is that the anxiety and worry go along with at least 3 other physical or cognitive, which means thinking problems. They call it symptoms. And in children, only one of these problems or symptoms can be necessary for diagnosis of general anxiety disorder. So those are 3 criteria. And the third criteria, there are some symptoms that must be there at least. And so we'll go to the next slide that shows those symptoms. Like I said, if you have any comments or questions as we go along, please put them in chat and we will look at that. So some of the symptoms that are identified in the DSM are: 1, edginess or restlessness, not being able to sit still, moving around a lot, being, another way they say it sometimes is being fidgety. When you're being fidgety, that is a symptom, a possible symptom. Another thing is being tired really easily or fatigued. And that's a really tough one because with the pandemic and COVID infections especially, feeling tired and fatigued can be one of those lingering symptoms of COVID that stay with some people for a while. So when making a diagnosis on general anxiety disorder, it's important to begin teasing out how long it's been there, how it began, and it's not uncommon these days for folks who have the COVID and who have had a COVID infection and recovering from it to have an extended period of fatigue. I think there are quite a few of us on this call that can relate to that. The third symptom is when our concentration or how we think about doing things gets changed. We'll be sitting there, and then our mind will like wander off, and that's a sign of a possible symptom of general anxiety disorder, is impaired concentration or feelings of not being able to put my mind to get things done. I want to read a book, and I'm reading a book, and I begin thinking about other things, and I forget the book. That's an example of that. Being irritable, and irritability can be not observed. We can have a lot of irritability inside ourselves. Our heart might be going quick, and our breathing might be affected, and we might be a little moving around like this a little bit, but other people won't notice it. And they might say that is how we usually are, but actually we might be going through a symptom of general anxiety disorder. The other thing that can be a criteria for GAD, I'll call it that, is increased muscle aches and soreness, and that comes from the tension that we have from being tense. When we're tense, we tighten our muscles. And if our muscles aren't used to that kind of tension, then we can experience muscle aches. And especially in our shoulders and our necks. That's what a lot of people say is, I got a sore neck, or my shoulders are sore. And those are some of the ways that physically can a symptom can begin to show up. And the last thing is basically having a hard time sleeping. You can have difficulty going to sleep or staying asleep. You put your head down, and your mind kind of thinks about things that happened during the day that maybe bother you, or you might be thinking about something that might be going on later on down the line. You kind of think about it and think about it and think about it. Next thing you know, you're like awake for a long time. And restlessness, you kind of toss and turn, trying to go to sleep, and sleep is not satisfying. Some people are used to 8 hours of sleep, and some people are used to 6 hours of sleep. It's all variation, but if you go to sleep and you're having trouble go to sleep and you don't get enough sleep, and you're feeling tired or not happy with how much you sleep, that can be a symptom also. So you got to have 3 of these things going on at the same time in order to be diagnosed as general anxiety disorder. And for kids, it can be one thing, as I mentioned earlier. Next slide. There's a caution related to whether we can be thinking about whether someone has general anxiety disorders. And that caution basically is that if someone's on a medication, there's a lot of medication that's given out by doctors sometimes for a lot of different health conditions, then those symptoms that we looked at a while ago cannot be associated, cannot be affected by someone taking medication. And it's something to really look at. If someone says, I'm feeling anxious, haven't been sleeping good, and a good question to ask is, are you taking any kind of medication? Are you taking any medicine? If the person says, yeah, then that's a sign that you may have to have, may have to be really careful of whether that anxiousness that someone has experienced is actually a worry or might be affected by medication. And of course, folks who are using or abusing drugs, alcohol, can have experiences that mirror or are similar to an anxiety episode or anxiety experiences. Withdrawal is a really good example. When folks are withdrawing from alcohol, it's very common to have a rebound effect from that, which means that your body reacts to not having alcohol, and there's a lot of anxiety that ends up being associated with that. So that's a caution to have around thinking about whether someone might have a general anxiety disorder. Next slide, please. So what are some other signs of anxiety that you might see or notice with people that come to you, or that you talk with, or that you know? This is a open forum. You can unmute and share your thoughts about the diagnosis criteria, the criteria for anxiety, and the different symptoms that were looked at, and share with us what your reactions are to that. Anyone? Do you have any thoughts on this, Shar?
One comment in the chat was, will folks have access to this recorded series or recorded webinar or training? And I believe Megan will send out the link, correct?
Yes, ma'am. There'll be an email sent with a link for the GIPRA, the presentation, also a link to the recording that's going to be made available. The good thing about the University of Iowa MTTC is they record these sessions and they put them up on YouTube. YouTube is a place where they put a lot of material, so if you have an interest in following up later on. So yeah, we'll have access to it. What do you think about this, Shar? What are some other things that you might notice when someone has anxiety? Or what has been your experience with that?
I just went down to get another cup of coffee, so I might be a little.
Well, we have some comments. Andrea says talking quicker. Yeah, it's very true, Andrea. Can you explain that a little bit more, Andrea? Unmute.
Yeah, so I mean, like, they have so many thoughts running through their heads that they're trying to get out, that they maybe have a tripped up speech, or they might mispronounce things, or say two words at once.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Just the speed and the inconsistency in which they're trying to communicate.
Would being tongue-tied or be kind of associated with what you're describing?
Yeah, tongue-tied or a loss for words, unable to kind of communicate what they're thinking and feeling because there's so much going on in their mind.
Very good example, Andrea. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Nelda, Nisha, you say pressured speech, jumping from subject to subject, pacing. Can you explain that a little bit more, Nelda?
Good morning. That would be like similar to what Andrea just shared. Speaking really fast and not really staying on the same subject. We'll start talking about maybe a physical illness, and then start talking about family who is refusing to take him to the hospital, and then the worst case scenarios, and then they're talking about money and just generally worried about everything all at once. And then sometimes just the physical movements, like pacing around, being unable to sit still.
Really good example. Those are some of the physical reactions, huh, that you're talking about. Jenna, thank you. I'm trying to control my anxiety because I think I had too much coffee. Caffeine anxiety. And then we have Malia saying doom scrolling, news cycle, rumination. Can you share a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, I
Malia?
can.
Mhm.
I think that one's a tricky one because it's like it can be a symptom of anxiety, yes, but it's like chicken or the egg, you know, is it a symptom of
Mm,
anxiety or is it one of the behaviors that falls into this cycle of anxiety? And it's also
mm,
one of those things that can really feel like a logical, appropriate reaction to having access to a news cycle all the time.
mhm,
But I think it always comes down to the question of like, how is this impacting the person's life? If it's contributing
mm,
to a constant state of anxiety, then regardless of where it started or how it started, it is a part of
mm.
the the way that anxiety shows in this person's life. And so I see that a lot. That was really big throughout COVID, you know, just this constant, like, let's check the COVID numbers every 5 minutes, even though it doesn't necessarily change your behaviors or the way you protect yourself. It really just adds to this anxiety about, you know, the world. And I think it's also a big thing with climate change and younger people constantly consuming news without having that news impact, you know, your behavior in a positive way. Instead, it just adds to the anxiety. And so, yeah, it's a complex one. It can be a symptom, it can be a cause, it can be everything. But it's definitely something to keep a lookout for. And for those who don't know, doom scrolling is when you just like keep scrolling through social media pages or news or whatever, even though you don't necessarily want to anymore. You're just doing it because you're like hooked on all of the bad things that you're seeing, or hooked on social media, or you know, scrolling in general. It's like a compulsion.
Thanks for sharing. Um, when I was a grad student, I know one of the things when I was doing my internship, one of the key learning or trainings, I guess, or advice I got was when you're working with folks with severe anxiety, you're going to feel that anxiety yourself as a person working with them. And so that was always one of my signs
Mm.
as a clinician working with someone with anxiety. I would automatically feel that anxiousness, that like hard time breathing maybe, or just felt like I had to be as fast as they could be. And then I had to remind myself as a clinician, calm demeanor, take your deep breaths, exhibit some of the breathing exercises. So that was one key sign for me when working with folks with anxiety.
Yeah, there are a lot of strengths that come from being empathetic, which is a key part of who we desire to be as helpers, having empathy. And I think Shar really does a good job at describing how our empathy can be a way to experience what a relative is going through, when they're coming with us fidgety or kind of moving their head a lot, or the speech is not as rapid or interrupted. That can, and as an empathetic people, we can pick that up. So thank you for that. Nelda also describes repeated visits to ED for racing hearts. Not racing hearts, I'm sorry. Being unable to breathe and then no medical finding, which is pretty common actually when you kind of consider how these two symptoms, especially the racing heart and rapid breathing, can take people to the ER or urgent care, look for an evaluation. So thank you for your comments, everyone. Very nice. Next slide. So here, let's look at what traditional approaches exist to deal with anxiety. There are some traditional ways that are available to us as healers, helpers, and family members and colleagues. one of the primary traditional approaches is prayer. In the Judeo-Christian way and Native American ways, it's prayer that is offered to us as a way to navigate through adversity in our thinking, or adversity in our hearts, and adversity in our behaviors, a way to settle us down and make a connection with the Creator, God, or the Yin and that, and be able to hand off, let's say, these disturbing feelings and thoughts and behaviors that we sometimes have. And that's a very traditional approach in all the ways of spirituality that are there. Another traditional approach, and sometimes we think about traditional approaches as ceremony and only, but there are other traditional approaches that are talked about and taught to us. And one is, being connected to relatives and being able to talk with relatives about how we're experiencing our lives at a given moment or time. And one of the real major impacts of the pandemic has been not having good connections that way. And many of our relatives are beginning to explore that a lot more, I think, around visiting each other. We'd become disconnected in the last 3 years because of the pandemic. And this is a traditional way of getting grounded and being grounded and getting feedback. Another traditional approach that is taught is to seek help, support. I'm a Navajo man, and I'm told by my relatives, my mom used to say this a lot, is don't hold things inside yourself. If you feel uncomfortable or uneasy about something, go see somebody, talk to somebody, a healer, or see a relative. And so help seeking is one of those traditional ways that are available to us. And that's where the process of prayer can come in, and songs too are there for us to go to if we're feeling particularly anxious or concerned about things that might be going around us. And songs are very nice. A lot of Christian songs in the Christian way that are very soothing, relaxing, and grounding. And in the Navajo system, many of the tribal traditional systems, we have songs that do that also. Social songs, ceremonial songs that are there. So, and another thing that is a traditional approach to deal with our feelings and behavior is by being fit. It's a little bit more than exercising. It's about working to have a good respiratory system, a good cardiovascular system, eating well, moving around. And a lot of us are in jobs where we have difficulty moving around because we're stuck in chairs in offices oftentimes. And I know that wellness programs and tribes are really working hard at getting us to be a little more mobile, walk around the building or walk around the block, or take 15 minutes out of your lunch and do a walk. Those are fitness activities that are valuable, And so, and putting together this section, I thought, maybe this would be a different way of explaining traditional approaches that are available to us. It's not all about, yes.
Sorry. Moon has his hand up, and then I had a couple of comments in the chat. What about smoking mountain tobacco? What about Mother Earth and the 4 sacred elements, therapy for healing? So just wanted to add that to your discussion.
Okay. Cassandra, can you talk about that, please?
Well, I know, excuse me, I know for in the Navajo culture, we do have different types of tobacco that can be mixed. And my thought was just around the mountain tobacco, that if you're having difficulty thinking about things, or you're having negative thoughts, if you're having, like, just to realign your thinking, put yourself
Mm.
back in balance, mountain
Mhm.
tobacco is definitely something that helps.
Yeah. I see my sister Orlinda is on the line and has a comment too about regrounding to Mother Earth and the use of the four sacred elements. Can you talk about that, Orlinda, Otto, Shadeja, Otto, what Cassandra described? Orlinda's my sister by clan, so I call her my little sister, my younger sister, not little sister.
Can you hear me now?
Oh,
Okay. Usually I recommend that majority of the time when patients are more traditional and more believe in the traditional ways. So
Mhm.
with the four sacred elements, it includes the Mother Earth, the air, the water, and the fire. And one thing I usually encourage them to is to do self-inventory and to be able to list the unresolved issues. Then one at a time, they can go with down the list by journal writing ritual, meaning writing
Mhm.
about it before, during, and after what went through, and then be
Mhm.
able to provide or present it to the four sacred elements and be
Mhm.
able to try to deal with that. But number one is to reground yourself with Mother Earth. Number two is to also connect with the sacred air and how you can do your breathing techniques and all that. The number three is to use the water to
Mhm.
be able to cleanse your body, mind, and spirit. And the last one is the fire, to be able to step back to them and let go and continue on. That's what I
Mhm.
usually do.
Oh, Anisha Deja Huta. And so we've heard a very good description of the value of smoking and resolving some of the adverse feelings that we can have by the ways. I know in the Navajo system, when someone is expressing thoughts or feelings that are uh, not well, then a cup of water can be offered to help settle down those feelings. And the mountain tobacco in the Navajo is called Tihna Adliye. Tihna Adliye is making an offering and blessing to soothe our mind and our hearts, and the songs and prayers that go with the mountain tobacco ceremony are very grounding that way. So thank you for the comments. Yeah,
And then Moon had his hand up. Go ahead, Moon.
Moon.
Mhm. Good morning, Wani Motapan. My name is Moon. Well, real name is Wayan, but translated means the moon. I just really wanted to validate this part, right? I'm super grateful that you shared this picture of the altar, because this is exactly what it looks so similar to the altar that I use and I'm going to be using tonight. And so I really want to validate the power of talking circles, right?
Yeah.
I started one back in March of 2020, and it was when COVID hit us, right? It shut down everything, right? For especially being a person in recovery, I was unable to go into in-person support group meetings, right? And so we attempted to do a virtual talking circle, and we have been doing it since. Every night, every Tuesday night, I'll be having one tonight. We have consistently done a talking circle, which includes the altar that you're sharing right now. We also have a fire that's burning on the East Coast. Back in New York, I have a relative having a fire burning to offer prayers in that fire for those that may be going through that hard time, right? And we have been doing this for the past 3 years consistently. Right? Consistently with at least 30 to 40 people on there every Tuesday night. So this traditional approach, it's evident, so evident that this is a healing mechanism for those that we're working with, man. So I really want to validate this and say tabutnish for going through this slide and sharing this with us. So tabutnish.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And the other thing I would like to ask of you while we're on this is in chat, let us know who you are by name and what you do, where you come from, so we can have that as a reference later on. Okay, so next slide, Char. Very good discussion. Thank you. Well, what are some of the Euro-American or Western ways that exist to help folks dealing with anxiety. And here we found a graphic made by the group called Very Well. They're on the internet. And they have a really nice presentation on stress and children. And, you know, some of the ways that are available to us is, you know, yoga, which is settling our mind and our body in a very conscious way. And associated with that can be meditation, you know, guided imagery, things like that are good tools, ways to settle ourselves down, and stretching. You know, some of us stretch a lot, and sometimes we hurt ourselves, but stretching is very good. Okay, and there are other examples like the kind shown there in the graphic, being a lot more careful with our scheduling, making sure we get outside and do things, summer, winter, all seasons of the year. And with children, especially reminding that holidays are intended to be expressions of gratitude and kindness. And to really work at managing sugar intake. We all have that challenges with sugar intake and starch, right? Making time for peace and quiet, which is meditation, and having a routine that is as grounded and normal as whatever you call normal is as possible. You know, after school activities and things like that. So thank you. Go ahead, next slide. So what are some of the resources available to us? Well, there are a slew of them that you're all probably aware of. One of the major ones that's really coming out of the system, and what brings us together today is the 988 system, where we can call, text, or chat with someone at the other end. The data from the National Collins Center indicates that chat is the number, or there are more calls going in to the 980 system than there are either texts or chat. The next tool with the 980 system that people are using more frequently is texting. The chat feature with the 988 is not as heavily used, and that's one of the challenges we have is to do that. For those of you in New Mexico, especially if you would like material related to 988 information, like what you see behind me, let me know, and we can get you business cards, postcards with 988 on them that are designed specifically for Native people. And that's one of the work that we do, is to give information out to our people on 988 and have them call. One of the things I do when I talk to relatives about 988 is I make a call myself to show how that works. And there's some programs that have small groups, and in small group talk about 988 and have people call to test it. So those are ways to get that through the system. We're working hard in New Mexico on creating a native warm line or a hotline. We're also working on working with tribes on putting together crisis teams in tribal communities that can be helpful for our people. And that's in partnership with the various tribal behavioral health programs that are in our region. And wellness centers are really good places locally to begin getting fit, having alternative things to do, get our mind off things that are troubling us, and doing something different. And like we heard earlier, talking circles, support groups are a really fine way of getting connecting. The University of Iowa has a virtual talking circle that's been going on for 2.5 years now, for example, and it's very well attended. And recreation, going out and do things. My recreation is driving around. I like sightseeing. So for me, that's recreation. And even though the price of gas might be a little bit higher, but recreation and doing things other than sitting in front of a chair and working hard and being concerned about stuff are some of the resources we have available. And next slide. If you have any thoughts about this also, please put them in chat. And with the next 30 minutes that we have left, we're going to go through a couple of case studies that Shar put together for us. And she'll be facilitating these 2 case studies. Go for it, Shar.
Well, good morning again. I was looking in the chat and people, thank you for sharing who you are, where you're from. We've got a lot of representation from Nevada, Oregon. I saw locally Zuni, Wayhan Smith, also known as Moon. He's new to our team at Aztec as our senior peer support worker. So welcome. It's just nice. And Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, like there's just a lot of folks around the country that are here. So I'm glad you guys were able to join us. As I mentioned, this is a series of 6. We're on our 3rd session and we'll have 3 more. But one thing that Ray and I have added is to do a case study, not a cast study, a case study. So what I wanted to do was I always try to provide a case study, one that's youth and then one that's adult. And so for those of you who work with a lot of youth at school-based health centers or locally in your community, it's just important to talk about what some of the youth are facing. So here's one case study. And we end about 10:30. So I'm going to try and do like 10 minutes per case study. What I want us to do is to identify some of the signs and symptoms of anxiety based off of what Ray had shared earlier. So I'm going to kind of go through this case study a little quickly here. Devin, 15-year-old boy, 10th grade, lives with dad. Mom left when Devin was 12. Dad works full-time as a mechanic in town, and Devin is often left alone until dad comes back from work. Grandma will check on Devin from time to time. Devin is active on social media, enjoys posting dance videos on TikTok and checking Facebook. Recently, he was bullied on Facebook for posting those videos. He was told he looked ridiculous and he's stupid for posting such childless things. And why doesn't he mind his own business? And so for the last 3 months, he stopped posting videos and became isolated. He doesn't do the things he enjoys and often is jumpy and irritable. He has racing thoughts that give him headaches and sometimes stomach aches. He's not sleeping well because he can't shut the stuff off that was posted on Facebook. It leaves him restless. He got into an argument recently with his dad for no reason, and he feels really, really bad about it. So this is why he came to the school social worker to talk about these feelings he's had, because he just doesn't know where it's coming from. So in your opinion, what do you think's going on here? And you can unmute. Do you recognize any signs and symptoms of what Ray mentioned earlier when it comes to anxiety? Is there anything that jumps out at you? Did I read it too fast?
Definitely the isolation, the restlessness, the irritability, the arguing, right? And it seems he got his feelings hurt, right?
Yeah.
He's feeling less than now, right? And he's not feeling good about himself. Those people say, sticking stones, that whole saying, right? Words definitely hurt, right?
Yeah.
Words definitely hurt. So now he's not feeling validated. So, but he's also showing a little bit of strength as far as being vulnerable enough to go and talk to a school social worker, right? So we need to validate him taking that initiative as well. But yeah, definitely having that anxiety of, wow, nobody likes me now because I'm posting these videos. Maybe that's when the anxiety is coming from, right?
Yeah. And for him to even seek out the help, that's pretty amazing. And how long have these symptoms been going on? Is there an identifier in this case study?
It says 3 months.
Yeah, the past 3 months. And so according to what Ray was mentioning, how can one be diagnosed with anxiety? There was an identifier in there when it came to general anxiety disorder. Do you remember you had to have these symptoms for how many months? Do you guys remember? I heard it. So whoever said that, You're on the right track. What was the number? 6 months, right?
Yes.
6 months. Can you imagine somebody dealing with that type of anxiety for 6 months to finally get a diagnosis of anxiety? That's pretty prolonged, right? That's prolonged stress and anxiety. So at least Devin is getting the help. He's noticing something's going on. He may not meet the full diagnosis of anxiety, but it's teetering on a halfway mark. And so we really need to provide the support we can to assist him. So what are some things that if he were to come into your office that you could provide to assist him? What would be some of those supports? Chat. So let me look at chat because more than 6 months, everybody said 6, great. What do you think we could do to assist Devin if he came to your office? You guys are so quiet this morning. This is all a learning opportunity for us.
One of the things that I've always tried to do, working with individuals and not necessarily regarding anything with anxiety or depression, that's kind of out of my scope with the license that I hold. But the most important thing that I find with anyone who I'm working with is that connection, right? That validation first and foremost, that rapport, right? Wanting him to feel comfortable enough to open up about how his feelings and not hold back about actually what really happened with him and those feelings that came along from what happened with him, right? So I think it's really just, first and foremost is validating, right? Showing that empathy for him and allowing him to know that this is a safe place, right? A safe place. I think we all need a safe place to be able to disclose the feelings that we're going through. So the first thing that I would do is definitely try to build that rapport with him. And validate his feelings.
Yes, that would be the first step for sure, right? Ensuring that, hey, that's a normal reaction, right? To someone who is really proud of their videos and proud of the dance moves, and then for someone to call it childless, and to call it stupid, that's going to hurt anyone's feelings. So yes, validating those remarks and the way he's feeling is definitely important. Are there other supports that we could provide in addition to the validation? What are some other things we could possibly do? So I have to look at chat. Let me see. Group support, counseling, engage in extracurricular activity, GAD-7 scale, GAD screening, very helpful. Teach him some breathing. Yes, exercises. Exactly. So teaching him some coping mechanisms, right? When he feels that anxiety, that anxious feeling, what are some things to lower the rapid breathing, the feeling like your heart rate is in your neck type of feeling, trying to calm the senses down. Another way to do this is also to talk about, just taking a walk and just smelling the air, hear the birds. We're right in spring, getting exposed to the air to calm down the thoughts so that you can calm down the breathing. Another thing is I was thinking about, what about support around family? What are some things around family that we could do with Devin that you would recommend? Does it mention anything? Has he told dad? As a young person, we always have to think about where are the parents in this picture or where are the guardians in this picture, because they're the primary source of support for young people. And so in this case study, does it sound like dad knows about this?
It sounds like they don't have that much of a relationship. Dad's working full time. He's left home alone. You know, so maybe they don't even have that connection. He doesn't even feel comfortable enough to tell dad.
Yeah. So maybe, a recommendation would be the social worker, telling Devin, it's really important to talk with dad about this. Do you want me to help facilitate that discussion, or do you feel like you could do this on your own? Tell me, Devin, what you want to do. But your parent really needs to know, or someone you trust really needs to know. If it's not dad, maybe grandma, but some adult in his life has to know, so that they can start providing additional supports, so that he feels supported and has someone to go to. When I work with young people, I always ask, who's your go-to person? Who's somebody you could tell anything in the world about something that happened to you, or, the good and the bad and the ugly, and they know they'll always support you. And I always make them identify that person before they leave, because that's going to be the person they should be talking to, who could advocate on their behalf sometimes. And sometimes it's not the parent. Sometimes it's an older cousin, or, an aunt or an uncle, but I always make sure it's an adult version, because that person could talk to the parents on behalf of the child. It's really important.
I think even helping him, maybe he doesn't have it in his mind, like clearly, of who his natural supports are, who his community supports are. So being able to help him identify who those supports are, and making that, so, helping him identify his own support network.
Exactly.
And help him.
Exactly. And at this age, they're 15. So they're going to have to start learning how to do that as an adult anyway. Right? They're on that path of adulthood at 18. And so teaching him, doing a community, like a diagram, who is your natural supports in your life, and having him diagram that out, so that he understands, hey, it's not just dad I have other relatives that I could count on, or other trusted friends I could count on. Good idea. Okay. So for the sake of time, because it's 10:11, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next case. Great comments. Thank you for your feedback on this. There's a chat. In our program, we have expert, then refer score is high to a counselor same day and case manager. Yes, case managers are very helpful, because they can provide the additional supports when it comes to maybe financial, housing, outside of the counseling realm too. So yes, case managers are key in providing supports. Okay, so this one is an adult case study. This is about Mary and Jim have been married 7 years and have no children. They have seen fertility specialists to try and get pregnant, but cannot afford the fertility drugs. Now they are considering adoption. Lately, Mary reports severe stomach pain, brain fog. She can't concentrate at work, not sleeping well. She's drinking more coffee to combat the fatigue, and her coworkers have noticed she is more irritable. Jim has noticed the mood changes too, and noticed the restlessness, racing thoughts, where she can't even finish a sentence sometimes. One time, Jim thought Mary was having a heart attack because she had trouble breathing. Jim wants her to see the doctor, but she says it's just stress. What do you think is going on in this scenario? Are there any signs and symptoms that you recognize that Ray talked about earlier? Anxiety over the infertility, grief and anxiety is starting to get to her. Yes. Sounds like a panic attack, possibly putting too much pressure on herself, too much coffee is affecting sleep. Exactly. Right. So those feelings of anxiety of, now it's getting to her that, I might not have children. And so she's exhibiting some signs and symptoms of anxiety. Do we know how long she's been exhibiting these signs based on the case scenario? Does it give us a time identifier? What do you guys think? we don't know how long the signs and symptoms have been going on, right? It really doesn't say 2 months, 3 months. We just know they've been trying to get pregnant for 7 years. So maybe asking Mary, how long has this been going on for? So you can get a timeline of the signs and symptoms she's been feeling. Yeah, no time identified. She probably needs a good family planning counselor. Exactly. So when we're not sleeping well, what happens just in general? When we're not sleeping well, what are some of the things that occur when we're not sleeping well?
Can be difficult to make decisions.
Mm-hmm. Can't concentrate, right? Brain fog. You're like, what did I just say? What did I just do? You know, I came here for a reason. Now I don't remember what I came here for. Has that ever happened to you? Because you're just so tired. And so obviously lack of sleep is a product of the lack of concentration, the brain fog possibly. So sleep is such an important factor in our life that we always have to ask, how well are you sleeping? So we understand, is it really the sleeping or is there something else going on? In the chat, someone mentioned the financial strain. She's probably having anxiety over the adoption or not. Do I do it? Do I not? Because that would be ruling out the fertility options. Exactly. So do you, in this case scenario, does it say that Mary's talking to Jim about her feelings around adoption? Does it allude to her talking to him about it? No, it doesn't, right? So maybe her not talking about it could be contributing to the anxiety. What do you guys think? Right? Her not talking about it. Go ahead.
Well, it can be scary to say something because, you know, once you say it, then it might, you know, might be true.
Yeah. And then you have to deal with those feelings and emotions that come with that, right? And then she's going to have to deal with like her husband's feelings around that. And sometimes you're not ready to deal with that because you're dealing with your own stuff, right? So she's probably going back and forth, back and forth. Do I do it? And maybe she doesn't really know what's going on yet. So there's a lot of mind stuff going on, right? And she has to clear her mind in order to really figure out what she's feeling. And so some of those tools and practices that Ray talked about, traditional practices, say this couple is traditional. What are some things that you could recommend if you know they're traditional based off of what Ray mentioned earlier? You guys know this one. Prayer.
Yeah, I was gonna say someone in there said a prayer, and you know, you asking, right? You're asking the creator for that guidance, for that strength to be able to speak, right? You know, maybe they're in an area and they offer those talking circles, and you know, those talking circles are powerful to be able to let that out, right? Let those feelings out. And maybe someone is there, someone in that circle is gonna be able to relate to her. And now what does that bring, right? That connection, that support.
To find the words to say what they're feeling, right? Sometimes that's all we need is somebody to say, I've been through that.
Exactly.
Hear their experience and you find those words. So yes, ceremony is another one. I don't know if Ray, I think Ray talked about this, but like sometimes I would recommend if I knew they were traditional, you know, if you use cedar or if you use sweetgrass or if you use sage yourself and sage your house, you know, like it'll bring that calmness, and pray for guidance on, you know, what it is you're supposed to do or say. So those are innate things as Indigenous people we know. And so it's important to remind our clients that they have access to those tools as well, right? So that they can utilize that. So great advice, guys. Are there additional things that you think would help Mary and Jim during this time of their infertility? What else do you think could help them? Nothing else? What do you think about Jim? You think Jim might have some things he has on his mind, but he's not maybe saying anything because he might be more worried about his partner? And maybe finding supports for Jim as well.
Yeah, men don't talk too much about their feelings.
Hey, I beg to differ.
They just shut down.
One said focus on self-care, exercise, relaxation, eating healthy, guidance from their spiritual leader. Yes. I also think, I'm sure Jim is feeling the emotions too, but he's probably like, I want to support my wife, or I want to support my partner. So I'm going to push my feelings aside and focus on her. But sometimes we have to remember there's two people in this scenario, right? So they're both feeling something. So helping Jim share some of those feelings or emotions, whatever, if it's writing it down, if it's talking to another male counselor or male provider, whatever it might be, it's also allowing Jim that space to share his feelings and emotions. That's very, very important. Let me see, time check, 10:21. Okay. Anything else about this scenario you guys want to add to? No? Okay. All right. Any questions that you might have for me or Ray about this webinar, this training around signs and symptoms of anxiety? Anything that you would like to see differently? That would be very helpful. It's easier when I stop share, then I can see everybody. Nothing.
I also provided in the chat my contact information. So later on through the day, the week, the coming days ahead, if you have any thoughts on how we can, make our connection time here good for all of us. This is what we can do. The last slide in the slide deck, Shar, showed the upcoming sessions.
Oh, it did? Okay.
Yes, it did. So it's possible. But as we close, I personally want to thank everyone for joining us today. You all have been very attentive and helpful, and working with us. I think it's the below case study should be there, somewhere down somewhere. There it is. So in May, coming up in May, in about 4 more weeks, the next session is going to be signs and symptoms of grief and loss. And that's what we're going to cover. I think the case studies you guys all react and participate in case studies very well. So thank you for doing that. In June, we have PTSD as a topic. July, we have suicide ideation as a topic. Then August, we have substance use and abuse as a topic. So I want to point out the upcoming sessions we have that we're working through with Shar's guidance and all of your guidance. So everybody who has made comment today has been really helpful. So
I have a question real quick. On the grief session next month, are y'all gonna cover complex grief and kind of like grief when folks are dealing with like one death after another? They never really get a true moment to grieve because there's always more. Yeah.
One of the changes of the DSM-5 TR is a diagnosis for prolonged grief disorder. So that'll fit into that discussion around the DSM-5 TR and how that diagnosis can be viewed and the criteria built into that. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
One of the comments in chat was to focus in September on recovery. We'll probably build in recovery in the substance use section because our series ends in August. So we're halfway through our series. So we have, I think August 30th, whatever that last fourth Tuesday in August is when our series ends. But this series really was for those who are paraprofessionals wanting to know the signs and symptoms of depression, anxiety, PTSD, trauma, is to really look at how can we recognize those signs and symptoms, but also provide the supports that we can within our licensure, but also within our scope of practice. And then when do we need to seek additional help or guidance around helping our clients? So this series is really for our paraprofessionals, and I'm grateful you all are here because you are adding so much to the learning content. I believe us talking it through really helps, right? At least that's the way I learn. I learn from others and sharing their experiences. So I'm grateful for you guys' feedback.
Mhm. Mhm. Very true.
Any other questions before we sign off, or comments?
I missed whether you said that the PowerPoint would be shared. I joined late.
Mhm. Yeah, the PowerPoint will be shared through the mental health TTC, and a recording of our discussion will also be made available on a YouTube channel, I guess they call it, that the MTTC maintains. So, and there'll be links sent to all of you for that information down the line. Okay. One more caution, I'd be negligent if I didn't say this, but please do your GIPRA. Okay. Let's GIPRA up, guys.
Yep. Yep. Our evaluations, please.
Let's GIPRA up and help us move this along. All right.
Thank you
Anyway.
all. You guys have a good weekend. Be safe if you're going to gathering. Bye.
Drive careful. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you
Bye.
very much. Go on, yeah, Deja, Olinda for joining, and Shanalda, Nelda. Yeah.
Bye, everybody.